Corporation. My personal motto is I build great big things for the web. Some of you have been in the area for a while may or may not remember the company EVP of Software. That was a company that I founded right out of college and ran for 27 years and had a successful exit. Followed that up with a stint as the CIO at Agrify Corporation, which was a startup that I helped take public about 4 years ago on NASDAQ. That was followed up by a stint as CTO at Volato, which is a private aviation company, which I helped take public a couple years ago. And now I'm the Senior Vice President of flyExclusive, another private aviation company. I got my contact information up there. For those of you who have, just show of hands, how many of you have participated in a startup or worked for a startup for a while? Okay. All right, so we all have PTSD from that experience. If you would like to kind of laugh a little bit about the experience, I created a personal brand, startupsamurai.printify.me, which has a bunch of collectibles and really funny product descriptions from working at startups. So, again, just to show of hands, how many of you I started programming JavaScript in 1995. How many of you were born after 1995? Okay, so for those of you who just raised your hands, I have actually been coding in JavaScript longer than you have been alive. Okay, so let's just get that straight. So generally, folks have called me a 10x developer, and they ask me, Steve, what goes through your mind when you're coding? And I say, oh, well, I always have four things that go through my mind: performance, scalability, robustness, and security. Right? And every single line of code that I write, I evaluate it against these four metrics. Performance: does the code run fast for the user? Are we able to minimize, refreshes? Can we make those refreshes run faster? How much can we do on the client versus having to make round trips to the server? Scalability, right? We want our server infrastructure, our cloud infrastructure, to run as quickly as possible and to be able to scale to user demands. Robustness is a key one, particularly when you're talking about AI, where things are changing almost on a weekly basis, right? The models that you use are changing. What's considered to be the best practices are changing. Very, very difficult environment, right? So a lot of what we're doing right now is developing code in various systems to be able to make things more hot swappable and pluggable, so that if we decide to switch from, say, ChatGPT over to an Anthropic model, we can very easily do that without having to rip apart the rest of the infrastructure. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. And then, of course, security is of course of paramount importance, particularly when you work in private aviation and you're under constant attack from folks who are trying to hijack emails and transactions that run in the tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, one of the things that we're building right now, and one of the really odd things about private aviation is, you would think you got all these guys are flying around in private planes. They're probably very sophisticated technology-wise. They're probably really into software. And it turns out that across the board, generally speaking, that's not really the case. The technology state of the art for private air carriers has actually been quite low, and that's one of the things that we're sort of seeking to change. So, I think there's this great debate that's going on right now, which is what is the appropriate use of AI? And a lot of folks are just saying, well, AI is just this big hammer, and everything I see is a nail, and I'm just going to apply AI to everything that I see and hope for the best. And that's, one way to go about it. We take a little bit more of a measured approach where we're developing, which I'm going to show to you, a new commerce site, which is going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, that, involves AI and some of the great features that have really come a long way in the browser in just the last 6 months, like the speech recognition API for having conversations with your computer. We're using the Anthropic API and Claude for our natural language processing in this solution. We've been looking very hard at model context protocol And the idea behind Model Context Protocol is it gives you an abstraction layer for calling tools or having the AI invoke tools that access web services to return structured data, things like pricing or information about airports. And then we're using in this solution Amazon Bedrock. So Bedrock gives us our scalability and security on the AWS platform, and also allows us to very easily swap out different AI models as we see fit. But having said all of that, even as good as AI is, and even as fast as you can make AI, sometimes a form is really just a better metaphor for the user. So we actually have developed a system, which I'm going to show you here, that actually has the best of both worlds, we hope. Right? So again, this system will be going live. This is pretty close to production code. We're just putting on some of the final tweaks and on the more on the documentation side than anything else. Yeah. How about that? That better? All right. So here we've got a form, more traditional form where I can say, hey, I want to fly from Dulles to, I don't know, I'm a big Disneyland guy, Disney World guy. So I'll go to Orlando, and I want to go next week, and I'll leave at, 9:15. And instantaneously, I get the prices for those one-way flights on the 4 different types of jets that we have, the light jet, the mid-size jet, super mid, and the Challenger 350, right? So, as it's very expensive, but as William Shakespeare once famously said, flying private doesn't suck, right? So from here, a user can come in, they say, all right, I want to see more detail on this. So maybe on the Challenger, you get pictures of the outside of the plane, the inside of the plane, and again, very luxurious. And the best part about flying private is you don't go to the regular airport. You go to what's called an FBO. Usually, you're the only one in the FBO, and the time from arriving at the airport to hopping on the plane is usually about 5 minutes or less. So you get all the different get all the different pricing and flight time, all that other stuff that should be showing up in there. Yeah, there we go. So there's kind of a pricing breakdown and whatnot. So, the question that we're sort of asking ourselves right now is this form a better metaphor for completing this, this operation for getting a private jet flight, or, is a chatbot a better mechanism for doing that? And certainly, the benefit to having a chatbot is that, it's going to go and respond to questions that are much broader in nature than the ones that are being asked for you to fill out on a form. And so one of the things that we found in our testing, and you see this in a lot of AIs right now, is they do allow for audio input, but there's not really a whole lot of great confirmation that's capturing what you're saying. It just sort of says, please talk, and that's it. So we kind of had the idea, well, I wonder if there's an API out there now in JavaScript, native JavaScript, where we could create a waveform of the user as they talked to provide that confirmation. And so, that's one of the big things about being in AI. I was like, oh, I know it probably involves Canvas. I don't really know much else about it. Let me just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what I want to build. And it went and built it out for me. And I just kind of copied and pasted that into my view code, and it worked. So let me go ahead and try this. I want a flight from Washington Dulles to Orlando MCO next Wednesday at 3 p.m. for 5 passengers. And so you can see here that that text to speech was actually, or speech to text rather, was actually done through the speech synthesis API baked directly into the browser. I didn't have to actually go to the API to do that. And I don't want to go to the API because it would have slowed down our performance, right? So it comes back, it says, yeah, sure, I'd be happy, to do that. It's saying next Wednesday for 5 passengers. I need your email address because we want to, of course, collect information, about the user. So I'll say Steve.Drucker at flyExclusive. .com, right? And so it's smart enough to, understand the contextualization of, what's going on. And, now it's going and trying to read from our pricing engine that we have that's, based on, a statistical model. It gives us all the information there, the estimated flight times. You can see pictures of the jets. There's our price, $18,385, which includes federal excise tax. Right? Here's our mid-size jet. There's our super mid, right? All the pricing, everything you'd want to know about. And then, by the way, if you join our jet club, you could potentially save up to $3,000 on this trip, right? So I'm just kind of curious. How much, show of hands, how many of you think form is a better approach to this? Yeah, so it seems like about maybe a 50-50 split or 60-40, somewhere in there. So the fact that we even got halfway there, I view that as a personal victory that we were able to get the AI to be responsive enough where and can combine with the voice input that the time to complete the task is roughly pretty close to being the equivalent of if you'd gone and you'd filled out the form, right? So let's talk about how we did it, right? Right. So, the tech stack here is Vue and Vuetify. How many of you use Vue? I love Vue. I really love Vue. I particularly love it with Vuetify. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's great. And actually, you've had some folks up here talking about prototyping. When I built out the form UI for that application, I actually just wrote the code in Vue. And I just kind of jacked around with it until I got to the point of, oh, yeah, this is pretty good. By the time I've made my 1,000th iteration, on it, I think this is okay. We're going to try this. Right, so we got Node.js for our retail pricing engine. We're actually using a framework on top of Node because everybody uses a framework on top of Node. We're using something called Sales.js, S-A-I-L-S.js, which is pretty easy to use. It contains an ORM. And server-sent events, right? So that's a big piece here. Currently, the recommendation is that for streaming the data back from your chat response from the server to the client, that should be done using SSE, which is really just a variant on HTTP. Okay, why not WebSockets? That's a good question. Generally, I think the sense is that if you introduce WebSockets, you introduce potential firewall compatibility issues with certain customers that may have those ports locked down. And also, the SSE streaming, you only really need one-way streaming here instead of two-way. But one of the things we have on our tech roadmap is to kind of really dig into whether using two-way comms through WebSockets is incrementally faster. We're really kind of trying to squeeze every millisecond that we can out of the interface or out of the response times. So the other thing is you might notice here we're not going directly to the LLM. And this is kind of important to understand. The state of the art or the best practice is that you create essentially a proxy server. So we're using Node.js as our proxy server. When you talk from the client talks to Node, and then Node then fires off data to Amazon Bedrock and Anthropic and Claude Sonnet, right? And what happens, and we get into kind of why, right? So Vue has got great dev speed, very fast, server-sent events, recommended over WebSockets. I'm still a little on the fence about that one myself. You got Bedrock is really, we've got potential PII issues. Somebody's email address is PII, right? So we want that to be hitting a local, an LLM that we control versus the public LLMs. And the Anthropic API, which we may wind up using their model context protocol in the future. It's not quite ready for prime time yet today, so we kind of rolled our own, right? So let me kind of walk through how this works, right? So step one, you get something in the web client. The web client talks to the chat.js controller. Chat.js controller then takes what the user typed in or what they spoke, speech to text, sends it to the LLM. Now, based on what they said, the LLM may decide that it needs to use a tool. It may have to call a RESTful web service, maybe several RESTful web services, to complete its task. So it sends that information back, that request for more data through those RESTful web services, back to our proxy server, back to our node server. So then at that point, the node server says, oh, I see a request to call a web service. So we've created an abstraction layer, and you certainly don't need to do these other 3 steps. You could have just, we could have just buried a REST call directly from here in the node server. But we wanted something that would kind of abstract away the tools from the LLM, so that if we wanted to swap the LLM out later, we wouldn't have to do any kind of redevelopment on that, right? So we have an execution service. It says, okay, I need to execute a tool to get pricing information. I'm going to go look up the nitty-gritty details about what URLs to call and what the parameters are that need to be passed in. Then I'm going to go and validate that data and execute it. I'm going to return that data, that pricing data, back to the chat controller, which then hands it back to the LLM, which finally generates its final response, which then gets streamed down to the web client, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces in this architecture currently. But does everybody get that? Because that's like a key piece here. And it's not, a lot of folks, myself included, when I started working with LLMs, oh, it's the LLM just going to call all that stuff magically. And to some extent, that's the way it worked back in the early OpenAI days. But now this is really the best practice. Okay. Right. So, so just real quick, in terms of how does this really work, right? Well, all LLM projects are going to primarily start with a prompt. Let's see if I can zoom here, right? So this is a very highly structured prompt. It says, you're the retail pricing agent for flyExclusive. You're going to help out your customers. It's basically establishing, what role the AI is going to play. And, don't repeat system details, aircraft descriptions, or any other conversation in history unless the user explicitly asks for it. Because what we were finding was that if we didn't put in this line and did a couple other things, no matter what you asked, it would kind of keep coming back with, and your price is this, and your price is this. Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? Which, in a certain case, maybe we should have left that in. But anyway. So then you have stuff like that you'd think you wouldn't have to put in, like today's date, right? And so this gets replaced at runtime. Why do I need to put in today's date? Well, it's pretty simple. The LLMs don't know what day of the week it is, or what, they have no concept of time whatsoever. So if I wanted to make the LLM flexible enough to respond to, hey, I want a flight next Wednesday, right? In order to figure that out, I have to tell it what day it is today, at least on Claude, right? So then we've got, the various tools, right? So this is where we start getting into the whole nature of agentic AI, where we're not generating AI so much as we're using this as a mechanism for calling a series of external discrete web services that are going to return data in JSON, right? So we've got our airport lookup, our pricing fetch, right? And so we're describing what our inputs and our outputs are in essentially English. And then we've got our different jet types. These map to different IDs in our database. So we've kind of hard coded those, which isn't great, but we're going to live with it for now. And we've told it it's going to call a fetch retail pricing tool. And then we've got our images, right, for the different types of images or different types of airplanes that we're going to fly. And when you're mentioning a specific aircraft, include some markup that references those images in as a background image in a div tag. And then you've got your general knowledge base stuff. So information about our programs, information about the planes and the fleet, information about safety, and basically all the stuff you'd have on a website. Essentially, all that becomes part of the prompt for the system to use. Right. So I kind of look at this, and this is 175 lines long, and has some fairly specific directives in here. And I swear the next time I see an article about how AI is going to replace programmers, I'm just going to slap somebody upside the head, because this is just another kind of programming, right? Just a different language. Well, actually, it's the language that we all speak, sort of. All right, everybody all good with that? Make sense? So, from a coding standpoint, what's going on here? Well, so this is getting passed in to the LLM initially to tell the LLM, how it should behave. And then the LLM is going to call this, this chat code. This is our proxy server. Right? So the LLM is ultimately going to call this proxy server, and so we've got a lot of data validation here, and it's establishing a connection, and so there's all this stuff for loading the markdown file, loading the prompt that we just saw, and then transmitting that markdown file to the LLM, and then ultimately we define a session ID. So every time the user activates or comes into the site, we assign them a UUID, so that all the conversations can be tagged to that user and that UUID, so we know what we've told them and what they've asked for, right? And then we've got these different tools that we've defined, and you can see here I've got another file. Zoom back out. Let's just go to the tool registry service, right? So I've got a tool registry service. Right, so in the tool registry service, this is where I'm able to kind of tell the LLM what web services are out there that it can rely on, right? And these are used in the prompting. What the parameters are. They're going to be used, which parameters are required, right? So we're just creating essentially a directory of, these are all the things that you can call that are programmatic outside of the scope of the LLM, right? And then, so the LLM is going to get this. It's going to say, oh, I need to use the, I need to use the airport tool. I need to do an airport lookup to find out, what the 4-character code is for Dulles, which is KIAD, right? So it sends that back to our proxy, and then the proxy picks that up and says, oh, okay, well, I'm going to now call the airport service. And so that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of, which URLs are going to get invoked, and how to call that actual web service. It's going to return JSON back to the LLM, so it can deliver. So the LLM can deliver the final response back to the user. Right. Everybody kind of following me okay with that? It's all it's a kind of a dance. Now we've got a lot of code behind this, and again, because we basically built our our own framework, and we're really kind of hoping that model context is going to mature quickly, so that we can rip all that code out and just use some APIs. But for right now, it's good to actually have the ability to have more introspection, more logging, more debugging, because like I said, everything is new, right? So we'll walk through that. All right, so I think I got like 1 or 2 minutes here for questions. Anybody? Yes. Yeah. Yep. So it does that. Yeah. So the question was, what if somebody just says, "I want to leave from Washington"? So I can just say, "I want to leave from Washington." Right. So it'll go and sort of, figure that out. There you go. Right? Yes. Yeah, so have we had any issues with hallucination? Well, I did used to work for a cannabis company, so, notwithstanding that, I got a picture of me standing next to like clear garbage bags full of pot. But anyway, we have early in the days, in the earlier days, we did have issues with hallucinations. We don't have issues with hallucinations really anymore because of the way that we it's all in the prompt, basically where we tell it not to hallucinate through repeatedly and in various different ways, shapes, and forms. Yeah. All right. Yep. Anybody else? Yes. Yeah, have I tried adversarial prompts like I hate you and your mother dresses you funny kind of thing to the LLM? Yeah. We've again through the prompt we basically really limited the scope of what users can ask and say. So, for instance, there's part of the prompt basically says if you're asking for anything outside the scope of what we told you to respond to, don't respond to it. So if you said, hey, who's a competitor to flyExclusive, which we can do here. Who are the competitors to flyExclusive? Oh. All right, I did say it was beta, okay? By the way, sir, would you like a job as a QA analyst for flyExclusive? Jeez. Anyways, I was not supposed to do that. Yes. Have we done any fine tuning? Not as of yet. We're kind of getting down to it, so that's sort of like on the list here for the next, week or so. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? All right. Yes. Yeah. 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 Well, the question is, how do you prevent prompt injection? I was going to give you the same response that I gave the other gentleman about, telling it to, ignore everything, but apparently we're not quite there yet on it. So I'll have to get back to you on that one. But generally speaking, in other experiments that we've done with the LM, we have been able to restrict it. Yeah. Last question. Yeah. 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 So a lot of times it'll start to drift just based on, look at the entire kind of conversation stream, that you've sent to it. So, we're doing things like we start a new conversation every time somebody comes to the web page. That's really kind of limiting it. We did run into a weird issue the other day, which is probably related to this NetJets Wheels Up thing, where we asked it who the COO or Chief Operating Officer of the company was, and it gave us the COO from like 2 years ago. I'm like, well, that's not in the programming. Where'd that come from, right? So we had to go back and tweak that. So it's a little bit of a work in progress in beta, but again, I think we're pretty close. And then the last thing that we're kind of hooking up on this is that we got one final tool that we're adding where you can say, okay, send me the quote, and it'll go through our pre-existing transaction system, so you'll be able to actually make the purchase online and fly anywhere you want. So one-stop shopping. All right. Okay, good. Well, thanks everybody.